Welcome back to True Ghost Vault. They say schools sleep at night, but they don't. They remember. They lock things away behind doors that weren't meant to open and inside walls that know your name. If you're hearing this, it means you stayed too long and something has noticed. Now, let me tell you a story. Story 1. School security footage. They refuse to release. I don't know how long I stood in front of the monitor before I saw it a hallway folded inside the screen like a trapdoor. The camera's red light blinked, but the corridor was empty. Floor tiles stretched in dull grays and blues lockers lining both sides in harsh fluorescent frieze. Then, for a sliver of time, something moved. Not into view, but from it, a pair of sneakers slid into frame, then stayed still, just beyond where the camera should have registered a body. That's when I felt it a shift in the air behind me, though no one was there. I spun. No one. No custodians. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant thrum of a school waking up. I pressed stop, but the shoes remained anchored to the final frame, an impossible trace. I arrived at the school at dawn, the kind of cold morning when exhalations turn foggy and your breath claws in your chest. My name is Jordan Hale, night custodian turned whistleblower. My job: check cameras before doors open, walk empty halls for debris or hazards. That day at 5:47 a.m., I tapped through the morning checklist and came to hallway C3. The feed was supposed to show nothing but lockers and pale tile sheen. Instead, it showed presence, a pause where breath should be weight without form. I'd seen bodies before on screens, students rushing, knocking doors, voices echoing. But this was different. No body, no person, just the aftermath. The control room smelled of stale coffee and plastic keyboards. Chairs rolled on linoleum scuffing. I leaned forward, volume low, listening for voices. All quiet. I hit rewind at 0013 static. At 15 seconds earlier, a student's shadow detouring off-screen. Then the frame snapped to black, full stop. And still the shoes persisted, as if tethered in memory. I reported it vaguely. Signal glitch, I said to my supervisor. Maintenance will handle it. In actuality, I kept a copy, a flash drive hidden in my sock, because I knew something was wrong. Not malfunction, not prank. Something buried, and I felt it reach out, hungry for acknowledgement. At lunchtime, I walked that corridor. Students clustered in clusters, laughter ricocheting. But the lockers felt colder than the breeze outside. I knelt, pressed my fingertip onto tile, cool, grainy. Then I tracked footprints in the dust where cleaning hadn't caught 6 small prints, irregular, spidery, half-faded. 2 matched that shoe model, scuffed Velcro straps, size 9. Mine was 7. I paused, heart drumming. Footprints stopped abruptly at a rusted service door. Later, I opened the footage again, this time slowed to quarter speed. I caught a flicker in the glass of an exit door, a reflection. Pale face, longer than human, eyes black as hollow frames. Not human reflection, no headlights, no face behind me when I looked. But there it had been, watching camera watchers. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You should stop. The timestamp same as the footage. I snapped my head toward the monitor. The corridor had shifted slightly. Skewed lockers, tile pattern, misaligned, subtle but certain. Someone had adjusted the digital feed. Eyes slammed shut. I had to pause, close everything, walk out. Tonight, I'm sitting in the dark of my apartment, lights off, but for the TV's faint glow, because I can't look away. I loaded the clip again, the final frame, the shoes, and in that grainy depth, I swear I saw toe twitch. Then I heard a voice inside my skull come back. It's no longer just security footage. It's a living thing, and it's hungry for me. I returned to the school the next night, long after hours telling myself it was for closure. But that wasn't the truth. I didn't want answers. I wasn't chasing understanding. I was being drawn back by something patient, something that had waited behind the screen long before I noticed it was watching. The key still turned smoothly in the front lock. My access code still worked. It welcomed me. The alarm gave its little confirming beep, cheerful and wrong, like it had no idea what lived in the dark. The building was different at night, not quieter, emptier, like the walls had exhaled everyone and held their breath for me. As I passed classroom doors, I could feel the air pressing in, thick with memory. All warning. Hallway C3 was colder, visibly colder. My breath fogged in front of me. The tiles seemed slightly warped, like someone had tried to iron out the floor, but left their fingerprints behind in the heat. I stopped at the place I remembered, the exact tile where the shoes had appeared. My eyes followed the seam lines on the ground. One line led to the janitor's closet. I turned. The closet door was open, only slightly, maybe an inch, maybe two. But I knew it had been shut when I walked by. The kind of open that's not an accident. The kind of open that waits. The air smelled wrong, like metal, like hot pennies and something sweet. The kind of scent that sticks to the back of your teeth. I stepped closer, every part of me screaming to leave, but I didn't. I reached out and nudged the door open further. It didn't creak, it just gave way. Inside was dark. Not dark like shadow dark, like depth. Like standing at the edge of a well and realizing the bottom is older than light. There was no mop, no shelf, no cleaning supplies, just a screen. Old, thick-backed, CRT, unplugged, still on. It showed the hallway I stood in, a live feed, except I wasn't on it. Instead, a figure blurry grain crawled, stood where I should have been. Same posture, same jacket, but motionless. I stepped forward into the frame. My image didn't change. The figure on the screen stayed perfectly still. Then it began to move, but not like video, like something remembering how to mimic me, slowly tilting its head not quite right. The neck bent too far. The limbs adjusted in tiny, jerky twitches. Then it looked up. I saw my own face, except I didn't. Because the eyes weren't there. Not blank, not closed, gone. Just two deep, scooped hollows, like the sockets had caved in from the inside. I couldn't breathe. The screen flickered. Static licked the edges. Behind the figure, something else began to form, darker than the hallway itself. A mass, tall and arched, no details except its movement, which didn't come from walking. It flowed forward. I backed away, slowly. My reflection on the screen smiled. I didn't. Then it raised a hand and waved. I staggered backward out of the closet, my shoulder hitting the frame hard enough to send a bolt of pain down my arm. The hallway looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Something had changed in the air. The pressure, the weight, like the building was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The door to the janitor's closet swung gently shut behind me, soundless. I didn't run. I wanted to, but I didn't. I walked because somehow I knew if I ran, it would follow, and it wouldn't pretend anymore. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. With every step, I'd expected the exit to appear, but it didn't. Just locker after locker, the same scuff marks on the floor, repeating like a scratched loop of film. I passed the same drinking fountain 3 times, the same burnt-out light above it. The water in the basin was shaking, not rippling, shaking, like the ground was humming, a frequency just beneath the edge of hearing. I finally reached the stairwell. The emergency exit light buzzed above it, flickering like it couldn't decide whether to function or fail. I pushed through the door and slammed it shut behind me. Silence. The stairwell was darker, and it smelled of dust and age, and something that reminded me of hospitals. I descended fast, 2 steps at a time, no sounds behind me. But that didn't comfort me, because I wasn't expecting it behind me anymore. I reached the basement. The door at the bottom was slightly ajar. Another one, another door that shouldn't be open. Inside was the old AV storage room, supposed to be sealed off. Nobody used it since the fire, or so they said. I stepped inside, and there they were, the shoes. Not one pair, dozens lined neatly against the wall, all facing the same direction. All different styles, sizes, but all worn the same way, like someone had walked in them until there was nothing left to walk. A faint sound tickled the edge of my hearing. Not a voice, a recording, a loop, and it was playing from deeper inside the room. I moved forward. Each step sounded louder than the last, like the silence was pushing back. The sound got clearer. A voice, flat and mechanical, repeating, "They left the door open. They left the door open. They left." I turned the corner. There was another screen, this one newer, flat mounted into the wall like a window. The image on it was crisp. Real time. It showed a classroom. One, I recognized Ms. Dreyer's English class. Except there were no students, just desks. And in every desk was a pair of shoes set perfectly in place. The voice continued, louder. They left the door open. They let it in. They let it. The screen glitched. For a single frame, less than a blink, I saw my own face, mouth open, screaming. But there was no sound, just that one phrase, over and over. They left the door open. I turned to leave, and the shoes had moved. Not all of them, just one pair, turned to face me. I froze. The pair that had turned were red, bright, childish red, with frayed laces and a worn-out heel like they'd been dragged through gravel too many times. I knew those shoes, not because they were mine, not because I'd seen them before in a locker room or on a playground, but because they were in the original footage. The same shoes that had stood in the hallway, the ones with no legs above them. Now, they faced me. The room was silent, the kind of silence that isn't quiet at all but full, like it's waiting to swallow whatever breaks it. I took a step back. The red shoes took a step forward. Not slid, not tipped over, stepped. There was nothing in them. No body, no legs, no invisible child. Just the shoes, moving like they knew how feet worked, like they didn't need the rest. I backed further into the AV room, bumping into an old film projector that hadn't worked since before I'd been hired. The air grew colder. My breath fogged again, the kind of cold that doesn't just touch skin, it replaces it. The red shoes stopped, 5 feet in front of me. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't not. They weren't alone anymore. Another pair turned, then another, then the entire wall of shoes rotated in unison, facing me, and I heard it again, that voice from the monitor. Only it wasn't mechanical now, it was real, it was behind me. They left the door open. I turned hard, hammering so hard it drowned out thought. The screen on the wall had changed. No more classroom, no more looping feed, just darkness. Then a hallway. My hallway? Camera feed from earlier real time, except in this version I was already standing there, alone, still, watching something I couldn't see. I moved to shut the monitor off, desperate to make it stop. But as I reached for the cord, my hand met glass. Not the edge of the monitor, a mirror. Somehow without moving, I'd been turned, and my reflection, and it wasn't mine. Same posture, same jacket, different face. Eyes scooped hollow, mouth too wide, skin blistered and thin, like stretched parchment. And that thing in the glass, it didn't mimic me anymore. It moved first, and I followed. I stumbled back from the glass heart, punching against my ribs like it was trying to escape first. The reflection didn't move with me. It stayed rooted, watching its face slowly peeling into something that might have once looked like mine, before time or fire or rot got to it. And then it smiled, not with lips, with the whole head, like something underneath had worn my skin so long it figured out how to make it express joy. The shoes behind me shuffled again. I turned just in time to see the red pair lift off the ground. They didn't fall. They rose, suspended midair, like caught in invisible hands, or like a puppet lifted from strings no one could see. The other shoes followed slowly at first, then, with jerky insect-fast twitches, an impossible orchestra of levitating emptiness, they began to turn, hovering, aligning midair toward me. The monitor glitched, the glass cracked. Not from pressure, from sound. A high-pitched tone was leaking from it now, so thin it pierced bone. It wasn't a scream, it was recognition. The room knew I didn't belong anymore. I lunged for the door shoulder first, breaking into the hallway like it was surface air after drowning. The lights above me stuttered and failed, plunging the hall into pulses of darkness. I ran. Every few feet a new corridor lit up ahead, just enough to show me the way, just enough to keep me from seeing what might have followed behind. But I could hear them. Those shoes didn't clack or stomp. They whispered against the tile, soft shuffling like children playing a game where losing meant being taken forever. I reached the main entrance, or what should have been the entrance. The glass was gone, not shattered, missing. Beyond it wasn't the street. No parking lot, no morning light from sodium lamps, just the hallway. Again, same lockers, same flickering lights. The building had looped itself, folding in on its own architecture, like a throat closing around a voice. I turned around desperate. The red shoes were there, so close now I could see the fraying threads, the dried brown smear across one toe. They stopped inches from mine, suspended in the air, and then they dropped, flat, lifeless. Except the sound they made when they landed wasn't just a shoe hitting tile. It was a heartbeat, not mine, but something else's, something waking up. The sound echoed impossibly loud for something so small, a single thump, deep and wet, like it had come from inside the walls. I froze. My own heart stuttered to match it, as if the rhythm had taken hold of my body, and I wasn't sure who was leading anymore. The red shoes didn't move again. They didn't need to, because the hallway behind them began to breathe. I mean that literally. The walls swelled outward, slow and sick, like lungs filling with cold air. The ceiling flexed. The floor beneath me pulsed, once a ripple passing under my feet like muscle under skin. The lockers groaned metal, straining like they were trying to open on their own. It wasn't architecture anymore. It was a body. The school was a body, and I was standing in its throat. A new screen flickered to life to my left, embedded in the wall where a trophy case used to be. I didn't want to look. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It showed the boiler room, the place I hadn't dared enter, the one sealed after the fire, the one the district never reopened. The feed zoomed in, without touch, without hands, just intention. In the center of the room, I saw a shape. Not clearly. It was crouched low, like it had no bones. Pale limbs folded too many times, skin pulled taut like soaked parchment over frame. A face turned toward the camera. No features, just the idea of a face. Its head tilted, and I felt mine do the same. I didn't move. It did. And somehow I followed. The screen cut out. The hallway lights blinked once, and all at once, everything stopped. The breathing, the pulsing, The hum in the walls, even the red shoes still lying flat on the floor, looked suddenly wrong. Like they had never moved at all, like nothing had happened except... At the end of the hall, a new door had appeared. I knew that wasn't possible. I'd walked this corridor 1,000 times. There had never been a door there, but now it stood tall, painted in matte black. No handle, no label. It was waiting, like a mouth learning to open, and I was already walking toward it. With every step toward the door, something inside me unraveled, not with fear, but with familiarity. Like I dreamed this walk 1,000 times, and only now realized it had always been real. The corridor behind me didn't just vanish, it was forgotten, like breath lost in winter air, like memory overwritten by something older. The black door loomed. It didn't open. It invited, and I was already too close to refuse. There was no handle, no frame, just a perfect, silent shape in the wall, painted the color of absence, and in the center, the outline of a hand, smooth, shallow, human-sized, mine. I raised my palm trembling. The moment skin touched paint, the cold was immediate, not sharp, but deep. It spread through my arm like water, soaking cotton. Then something pressed back gently, eagerly, like it had been waiting for this moment. For me, I tried to pull away, but my hand sank in. The door softened around my wrist, then my forearm, drawing me forward like breath into lungs. I didn't resist. Not really. It felt inevitable, like waking up from someone else's dream and realizing it was yours all along. The dark swallowed me. There were no walls on the other side, no floor, no light, only screens. Endless flickering monitors suspended in blackness, stretching in every direction. Some the size of cell phones, others towering like cinema projections. Each showed a space I knew: stairwells, boiler rooms, gymnasiums. Schools, always schools. Each screen blinked, in and out of static. And in each one, something moved toward the lens. Slowly, too slowly. Just enough to see it. Just enough to wonder if it was real. I turned in place. Behind me stood a neat line of shoes. Hundreds of them. All different sizes, all worn, all turned to face me. They didn't move. They didn't need to, because I understood now. This wasn't punishment. It was continuation. I looked down at my feet. I wasn't wearing anything. Just tile. Just cold. And then a new screen lit up in front of me, bright, jarring. A hallway, mine. Hallway C3. Real time. A girl was walking into frame. Young. Maybe 12. Hoodie too big for her shoulders. Phone light bouncing against the walls. She paused. Looked up. Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth. She saw something. She saw me. And before she could scream, before she could run, the screen cut to black. I opened my mouth to cry out, to stop it, to beg it all to end. But there was no sound, only the steady creak of laces tightening around unseen ankles. Only the flickering hum of new footage beginning. Only the knowledge that now I was part of the system. A loop. A presence in every hallway that should be empty. Story 2, he was sent to detention. He never left. I still remember the moment I saw the detention sheet in the main office. His name scrawled beside the flashing date stamp. He was assigned to room C17 for the afternoon session. He never left. You want a story? This is one carved into blank faces like a nail driven through memory. I was the hall monitor, the one left to check after hours. School corridors, empty lockers humming with sealants, and the faint smell of chalk dust lingering in recalcitrant corners. They said he stayed late for a refusal. Something about refusal to hand over a phone, refusal to say sorry. But it was more than stubbornness. There was something in his eyes when I escorted him to the classroom, something that stayed long after he walked inside. That night, I returned locked to building lights off corridors cold and sterile and went straight to room C17. The door was closed. That alone could feel ominous at 7:03 p.m. Something about the hush in the hall made my steps loud enough to echo 3 or 4 times before dying off into nothing. I stood outside the window peering in. Empty desk, chair, blackboard wiped clean, but on the floor a smear, maroon. Not perfectly bloody, more like sludge. Clinging. I froze. At 7:04 p.m., the smear shifted. Not drip, but spread viscous crawling in threads across the tile toward the door, leaving faint footprints. I called maintenance. They found nothing the next morning. No stain, no trace. Room cleaned, sanitized, except that smear. It wasn't blood, not exactly. It smelled like iron and regret. At night, I pictured that smear moving again, covering the walls, pulsing in shapes of hands and legs and a face. A face I couldn't describe. Then came the tapping. 2 nights later, I heard it behind the closed door of C17 slow. Fingernails dragging across wood. Paused, repeated in irregular rhythm, like someone counting but skipping numbers. I knocked. No answer. The door didn't swing open. Not then. But later, I found a small handprint smudged into the varnish of the doorknob. Tiny flat wrong. I slept. I woke screaming. His name came out in fragments, Jesse. I worked the morning patrol. No anomaly. But at lunch, a teacher asked, "Why is room C17 locked?" The custodian said they found the desk inside, pushed against the window, but the glass was unbroken. The desk had moved by itself, and on its surface scrawled in chalk the single word, "Stay." That afternoon, I opened the door. The room looked empty again. The floor wiped, but on the desk, 3 pieces of chalk arranged in a triangle, pointed ends toward the center. A triangle doesn't happen by accident, and the board behind the desk held one sentence freshly written. He didn't leave. His name wasn't erased, but no one spoke it. I didn't sleep. Instead, I watched cameras pacing through loops of empty halls, all quiet, all still. And then in one frame motion, the back of room C17 door swung closed. Slowly, with no wind, the bell rang for dismissal. I entered the empty school, doors locked, lights off. I made my way to C17 with a flashlight. Inside, I found his desk, center of the room. On it, a phone cracked screen battery, dead, his name engraved in faint letters. I recognized it from the photo I'd seen in the discipline log. I picked it up. It buzzed, image on screen. Jesse eyes wide mouth, open silent, his hand framed, in camera view pressed against the glass of a classroom window. Behind him, shadows, long, stretching. And then the screen died. I dropped the phone. Lights flickered and then went out. I didn't run, because when I looked at the door, I saw a handprint. Not chalk, not smear. Flesh, shaped pale against the wood. And on the blackboard, in chalk, written in the same tidy letters, "You stayed." I turned to leave. The door was shut, locked, and I realized as the hallway darkened behind the glass that he'd stayed, and now so had I. The click of the lock was so quiet, I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard it. Almost, but then the light under the door disappeared, swallowed by something thicker than shadow. It wasn't just dark outside that room, it was absent. Like the world behind the door had ceased to exist. No hallway, no building, just me, and the desk, and the words on the board that hadn't been there seconds ago. "You stayed so they can see." The chalk letters weren't trembling. I was. I backed toward the far wall, flashlight beam shaking, catching corners and surfaces that looked familiar, but too familiar. Like someone had studied the room too long and rebuilt it from memory, slightly wrong. The posters were faded, but not with age, with intention. The clock above the blackboard ticked but didn't move, just a ticking sound on a loop, like someone trying to convince you time was still passing. Then I heard it, breathing, shallow, fast, not mine, coming from under the teacher's desk. My legs refused to move. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to run, to get out, except there was no out. I leaned forward, slowly. The flashlight caught the desk's metal leg, then the hollow space beneath. I lowered the beam, empty, but the breathing continued, now behind me. I whipped around, still nothing, but the words on the board had changed. He asked to leave, but no one answered. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. My foot hit something. I looked down. The phone. It had moved. It now sat beside the chair Jesse had occupied that day. The screen was lit again. A new video. No sound, just grainy footage of the classroom. My classroom. My body sitting where Jesse had sat. But in this version, I wasn't alone. Behind me stood something tall, bent. Its face was a blur, not pixelated, smeared like a photo dragged across wet glass. Its arms hung too long, hands pale, twitching at the edges like something learning how to be fingers. The figure leaned closest to my shoulder in the video, whispered something I couldn't hear. Then I on the screen turned to it, slowly, willingly, and smiled. I dropped the phone. The lights blinked once, then stayed off, and the desk behind me scraped against the floor. Not pushed, pulled. I turned. The chair was no longer empty. Someone was sitting there. I couldn't see his face, but I knew who it was. And worse, he was smiling too. The smile wasn't cruel. It wasn't even human. It was too wide, too calm, like he knew something I hadn't learned yet. Something final. His face was dim in the low light, but the outline was unmistakable. Jesse, the boy who never left. But this wasn't a reunion. This was a replacement. He sat with his hands folded neatly on the desk. His skin was waxen, the kind of stillness that only comes when something has stopped pretending to breathe. His eyes locked onto mine, not pleading, not angry, but expectant. Like he'd been waiting for me to show up and take my turn. I took a step back, knees weak. My back met the wall. The air in the room pressed in like a closing fist. Every surface felt closer than it had seconds before. The blackboard, the ceiling, the very air seemed to thicken, like it knew I didn't belong here anymore, or maybe that I always had. Jesse raised one finger, not to point, to gesture. Sit. I shook my head. He gestured again, this time slower. Still that faint smile. Sit. Behind me, I heard a soft rustle fabric against wood. Another desk, a chair. I turned. There were more now. Rows. Every desk filled. Shadows in every seat. Not moving. Just there. Students who hadn't been there seconds ago. Or maybe had always been. Their faces were blurred. Some shifted slightly, like wind passing through heavy curtains. One reached up and scratched at the base of its jaw. I heard the skin tear. I was the only one standing. I had been the only one left to check the room that day. And maybe that had always been the point. Not punishment. Succession. Jesse stood. I didn't move. He stepped away from the desk, never breaking eye contact. And then he left. Walked to the door. Opened it. The hallway was there again. Normal. Fluorescent lights. Empty lockers. Everything as it should have been. He looked back once and smiled. Then he walked out, disappearing into the light. And I understood. That's how it worked. Someone had to stay, and I had been chosen. I turned slowly, sat in his chair. The wood groaned beneath me like it remembered his weight. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The blackboard wiped itself clean. Fresh chalk in the tray, and from the far end of the hallway, I heard footsteps. New ones, getting closer. The footsteps echoed long before the figure appeared, sharp, hesitant steps, the kind that bounce off linoleum and don't know where they're going yet. I stayed seated. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I simply waited like Jesse had, and maybe others before him. The classroom around me felt colder, but not empty. The desks were still filled, every chair occupied by shapes too still, too patient. Shadows with spines. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They watched. And now so did I. From the glass pane in the door, a new face appeared. Young, unfamiliar, eyes scanning, confused. He knocked once. Softly, I didn't answer. I couldn't. He opened the door slowly, like a child stepping into his first classroom after hours. Backpack slung low. On one shoulder, sweatshirt bunched at the sleeves. The hallway behind him stayed frozen like it had been cut from a photograph. He took a step in, stopped. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto mine. I didn't speak. That's not how this works. He looked past me, saw the desks, the students. He didn't scream. He just looked. And then slowly he stepped forward, like he couldn't help it. Like something in the room had gripped the part of him that still dreamed at night and pulled. The door closed gently behind him. He moved past the rows. Shadows twitched ever so slightly in their chairs as he passed, barely perceptible, but undeniably alive. The boy moved toward the front of the room. There was a desk, empty, waiting. He reached it, placed his backpack on the floor, and sat. The breath left my lungs slow and soundless. Another had arrived. My shift was over. I stood. The chair gave way beneath me without resistance. I turned to the door. The hallway waited unchanged, sterile, bright, open. My feet knew the way. I walked past the lockers, past the main office, through the double doors that once led to the world outside. But I didn't exit, because there was no exit. There was only the next corridor, and at its end, another room, another board, another desk, another name written down on a slip of paper no one would remember filling out. Detention isn't punishment, it's passage. And I had made mine. But now I think of the boy, quiet, curious, unaware, and I wonder when his turn comes. Who will replace him? Because someone always has to stay, and someone always leaves, even if they never remember how. The air outside the classroom felt lighter, like stepping into a lung that had just finished exhaling. But it wasn't relief. It was release, temporary, conditional, like a rope slowly uncoiling from around the throat, but never far enough to let you forget it's there. The hallway stretched in both directions, still and sterile, the kind of clean that only exists when no one's walked it for years or minutes. Time doesn't behave here. It pools in corners, slips through light fixtures, disappears when you try to hold it. I walked, not toward the exit, not really, just forward. Every footstep felt chosen, like the floor itself was selecting where I landed. Locker numbers blurred as I passed some scratched, others pristine. I reached out and let my hand trail across them, hoping for a clue, something human. But all I felt was metal, long since cooled, like no one had ever used them, like no one ever would. Then I saw it. Another door. Not a classroom, not labeled, just there. I stopped. It wasn't open. It wasn't locked. It waited. I didn't want to go in, but I didn't want to keep walking either. Behind me, I knew the boy was still seated at the desk, chalk in the tray, board behind him clean, just like when I arrived, just like when Jesse left. I opened the door. Inside was nothing. No desks, no lights, no floor I could see. Only screens floating, hundreds of them suspended in the dark. Each screen showing a different school, a different room, different students. Some empty, some not. And in every one, a chair at the front, waiting. I stepped forward. The door closed behind me without a sound. I didn't look back. I knew what I had to do. Because the system is old. Older than detention slips. Older than teachers. It's a machine made of rules and quiet and chalk. And it needs someone to hold the silence. Even if it's only for a while. Even if no one ever sees you leave. Story 3. There's one door in this school that was never meant to open. I can't remember what came first, the cold draft slipping under the door or the way the hallway seemed to inhale when I stepped outside the classroom. But I remember the door itself, its frame, chipped paint peeling in half moons, and a tarnished handle that looked too new, like it had been replaced just for emergencies. Except no one told me what kind, and that door had no sign, no label, just a sliver of darkness beneath. The moment I tugged it open, the silence inside slapped me harder than any loud noise could. It wasn't empty, not exactly. The air was dense, like breathing ash. My flashlight danced over peeling wallpaper, cracked tile, and a single window so high it caught only moonlight spilling pale silver over a desk. One desk, one chair, facing the door. I stood frozen there, breath hitting plywood boards like apology. The light trembled. I didn't know whose desk it was, didn't know what authority it had, what rule made it sit alone in that corner of the school where no students walked. I thought maybe it was old, maybe a forgotten teacher's office, maybe a former record room. But there was no record, no plaque, no rosettes, no nameplate. Nothing but the desk, and on it a single photograph in a cracked frame. A boy, 11 or 12, crisp uniform, his lips pressed like a seal, his eyes bright, too bright for the smile around them. Behind him, lockers, hallway green, my hallway. I swallowed. Behind me, the door clicked shut. I hadn't touched it. A low hum pulsed through the room, not mechanical, organic, like blood in veins. I turned slowly. The photograph face sprung forward in the light, and I noticed the frame outline scratched into the desk itself, gouged deep enough to catch shadows. As I looked closer, I realized something about the face. It wasn't smiling. The curve of the lips was flat smile, drawn in memory, not truth. The eyes, though, they followed me. I backed away. My leg knocked something. The chair scraped. It whispered, not with breath, with guilt. I couldn't help looking down. On the floor, chalk scrawled a word, stay. I dropped the photograph. It hit the floor. Glass cracked. Without warning, the chair spun around, empty. I knelt and pushed it back. The chalk word was gone. Clean floor. But the desk remained stained, darker than wood, should be moist, absorbing the light. As I stood up, I heard whispering behind me. Soft, multiple voices. Hundreds, maybe. Arguing over something they couldn't let go. The words tangled, but one floated clear, wrong door. My pulse hit my ears. Sweat cooled on my neck. The flash of crestfallen regret in those voices fractured into a single invitation. Leave. I nodded to someone, something. Swiveled the flashlight toward the door. It hung open, even though I hadn't touched it. Beyond it, the hallway spread normal. Warm fluorescent hiss. Locker echoes. The world I'd walked every morning. I stepped toward it, but my foot caught on something. The frame read 13. Door number 13. Never entered in drills. Never listed in maps. Never mentioned. But I opened it, and now I had. Outside, the hallway lengthened, silent and expectant. The smell of chalk dust, machine oil, new paint echoed behind me. I didn't glance back because I already knew what waited in that room, and I knew what I'd become. There's one door in this school that was never meant to open. That door opens itself, and now it's waiting. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say that a room with no number tried to breathe me in, that I saw a chair move without touch, a desk bleed, darkness, a photograph of a boy whose smile lied. I didn't have the words. Or maybe I had too many, each one heavier than the last, clogging the back of my throat like wet cloth. But I started walking different paths, avoiding that end of the hall, skipping door 13. The other teachers didn't notice, or they pretended not to. I asked once casually, like testing the air. Before a storm, "Hey, do you know what that little room is by the east stairwell? The one with no label?" They paused mid-coffee sip or stack of papers and blinked. Then what room? I dropped it, nodded like it hadn't mattered, but something in their eyes flickered. Not confusion, memory, buried deep. I began to watch the students closer after that. Their roots, their hesitations. One boy, Eli, quiet, bookish, always last to leave. He stopped once near the door, just stood there, looking at it like he expected it to say something. I called his name. He jolted like waking from sleep. Didn't remember stopping. Didn't know where he was. And when I checked the school map later that night, the area beyond the east stairwell was shaded over. No room, no utility closet, just blank. I dreamt of it. Not the door, but what's behind it. A sound like chairs dragging slowly across tile. A wet whisper of breath that doesn't belong in lungs. And the boy, always the boy, always sitting, always watching me. Sometimes he's older, sometimes younger, but it's always him. A smile painted on two late eyes too wide, like they've seen every time someone made the same mistake I did. Opening that door, looking inside. Tonight, I stood in the hallway again. I don't remember walking there. The door was already ajar, like it knew I'd return. And I knew what it wanted. It doesn't ask you to enter. It just waits for you to stop resisting. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough for the lights above to flicker once, then twice. Long enough for the air to change, subtle at first, like the shift before a thunderclap. Then heavier, like gravity, deepened around that frame. My ears felt full, my breath came too shallow, and the hallway behind me faded. Not with darkness, with absence. I reached for the handle, not because I wanted to, because my body did. Like remembering a motion long buried in the spine. The door creaked open fully. Inside, same desk, same chair, same light from that unreachable window. But now the chair was turned toward me, and it wasn't empty. The boy sat cross-legged, same navy uniform, same pale hands folded in his lap. But his head was tilted slightly now, listening, not to me, to the room, as if it was speaking through the walls, telling him something I wasn't allowed to hear. His eyes met mine, and that's when I realized he recognized me. He smiled, not warm, not cruel, just inevitable. He'd been waiting, not for someone, for me. I stepped inside. The door closed gently behind me. No click, no lock, just the hush of finality. My feet scraped the chalk outline again on the floor. Stay. The air pulsed. The desk trembled. A drawer creaked open by itself. Inside it was another photograph. Not framed. Folded, cracked. I picked it up. It was me. Much younger. Maybe 13. Same hallway, same lockers. Standing in front of this very door. In the photo, my hand was already on the knob. My smile, it wasn't mine. I dropped it. The paper landed face down on the desk. The boy in the chair stood up slowly. For a moment, I thought he might speak. Instead, he stepped around me, walked to the door. opened it. The hallway outside was lit, alive. Students moving, normal. He turned once before leaving, and with a quiet nod, he stepped out. Gone, leaving me. The chair behind me let out a sigh. Wood and weight, age and memory. It waited, and so did the room, because someone always has to stay. I sat down. The moment my weight touched the chair, it felt right. Not comfortable, not familiar, just correct, like sliding into a space. Carved specifically for me, down to the trembling rhythm of my breath and the quiet ache behind my eyes. The desk in front of me was cold, its surface worn smooth by too many arms, too many waiting hands. I ran my fingers across the grain. They caught on a faint carving initials. Not mine, but close, just a single letter off. The light through the window didn't change. It never did. Stuck in a permanent hour that wasn't day or night. A breath held, a second just before the bell that never rings. I listened to the silence, to the room breathing through the walls. It was full of memory now. I could feel it behind the plaster, footsteps, whispers, doors opening and closing again and again. Other students, other teachers, all the ones who sat, all the ones who waited. I understood something then. The room doesn't take people, it holds them, preserves them. It keeps the weight of what was never supposed to be noticed. That's why there's no label. Why there's no record. Because to name it would be to admit it's real, and if it's real, it has to be explained. And no one can explain this. I reached for the chalk. I didn't mean to, but my hand moved anyway, and I wrote one word on the board. Next. The letters glowed faintly in the dim. The chair across from me scraped back an inch on its own. Ready, prepared. Someone will find it. Not tomorrow, not next week, but eventually. The hallway will guide them here, gentle and slow like it did me. And the room will watch, and they'll see me just a man, sitting calmly at a desk, waiting for nothing, asking no questions. And I'll smile, not warm, not cruel, just inevitable. Because there's one door in this school that was never meant to open. But it does, and it always will. Story 4. He found a diary in the wall. It knew everything about him. I realized the diary existed when the wall whispered my name. It began with a soft scrape, barely noticeable, beneath the attic floorboards. I'd been up there rummaging through boxes, old clothes, childhood toys, yellowed photographs, when the scuff came again, directly behind a faded wallpaper seam. I paused, breath hitching. Another sound paper sliding, like someone turning a page. Beneath layers of plaster, something pressed, something alive. I pressed my palm to the wall, cold but not dead. There was warmth inside. My name. I didn't know it yet, but I'd feel it later, carved in cursive lines that knew me. I cut open the seam, carefully peeling back paper until I unearthed a hidden cavity. Inside lay a leather-bound diary, edges tattered and brittle. No name on cover, only a faint imprint I thought was a smudge until I held it to the light and saw it my initials. Not in my handwriting. A looped signature I recognized from school rulings, library fines, mortgage documents. I'd forgotten. Paul H. stared back at me. Hands shaking, I opened it. The first page read nothing. Blank. But the moment I turned it, a new entry appeared, dated last night. It described how I'd cut the wallpaper, how the wallpaper tore in my right hand before I even knew my hand held a knife. It described the ache in my wrist from old arthritis flare-ups. It described the way I breathed in dark rooms, loud, uneven, haunted. My heart thundered. There was no record of this book existing, no journal I'd bought, no ghostwriter, no secret pen pal. Yet here it was, recording my every detail, even the ones I'd buried. I flipped pages, each day mapped. Moments from childhood I'd long suppressed, tripping in the cafeteria, laughing cruelly at me for stuttering. The ache in my chest when my mother died, the secret glade by the river where I used to cry at 13. It was all here, vivid, raw, drawn in graphite pencil lines that throbbed with memory. Then the writing shifted. It became about now, about tonight. It described the attic door creaking as I climbed the stairs. It described the cough I had in the cold air earlier. It described the way my boots pressed into the dusty floor. On the next page, a sentence in fresh ink. You found this. Now I know you. I dropped the diary. It landed open-faced on a beam. I backed away, breath shallow, skin prickling. A rasp in the attic boards shifting, not settling. Something behind the wall stirred. I didn't want to go back, but I had to know. Slowly I leaned in again. Another entry had appeared overnight. You looked at the ceiling, not at me. It was right. I had, because I was terrified to look beyond the crack, beyond the diary's words. The page turned itself. On it in the margin, I see you here. I realized then it wasn't a diary. It was a mirror, not of glass, but of me. My thoughts, my fears, my weight pressed into the floor, my regret still pulsing beneath my ribs. I reached out and touched the page. My fingertip brushed fresh ink. It trembled. The attic air seemed to swallow sound. I waited for something to speak. A whisper, a breath, a confession. Instead, the diary snapped shut. That was when I understood it wasn't contained in the wall anymore. It was awake, and it knew everything, past, present, future. About me, about my life. Then, a final entry appeared, scrawled across 2 blank pages. You can't leave. The attic door slammed behind me. I dropped the diary again and turned. But out there was darkness, deeper than the attic beam. A void. I was trapped, and the diary sat at my feet. It knew where I am, and soon it might know where I end. Even now, if you listen closely, you might hear the wall murmur his name and watch the pages turn themselves. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. Either that or the attic stopped distinguishing between night and day. Because when I woke up, the light filtering through the high window wasn't dawn or dusk. It was something in between, dim like memory, and colder. The diary was still there, perfectly closed, waiting. I stared at it for a long time, too long, before I dared pick it up again. This time it opened on its own. The page was blank for a heartbeat. Then the words bled in letter by letter, like they were being written from the inside of the paper out. You forgot what you did. My breath snagged. I whispered without thinking. What more ink surfaced? You forgot what you buried. The attic air shifted. Not a breeze, more like a presence. The kind of hush that follows terrible decisions. The kind that fills hospitals at 3 a.m. and old churches after funerals. It coiled around my spine, pained and close. I flipped the page. A drawing. Rough pencil lines, childlike but unmistakable. A tree, a mound of dirt beneath it, and beside it the shape of a boy. My stomach dropped. It couldn't be. But I remembered the dream I used to have as a child, digging under the red maple by the creek behind our old house, hands covered in wet soil, crying for something I couldn't see. A dream. Just a dream. But the diary knew it. It drew it. My hands shook. I turned another page. You didn't look close enough. You never looked. Below the text, a scrawled address, mine, but not current. The first house, the one I hadn't seen since I was 9. I stood up so fast the diary fell from my lap. My legs were weak, trembling, but I had to leave. I had to see. Because if this thing was right, about the tree, about the mound. I grabbed the diary. It pulsed warm in my hands, like it had waited for this moment. And as I stepped down from the attic, every stair seemed to echo with something more than sound, a warning or a memory waking up. The drive to my childhood home felt like descending into a version of myself I had tried too long to outgrow. The roads hadn't changed. Same cracked asphalt, same whispering trees leaning just a little too close to the edge of the pavement. But everything felt wrong. Not because it was different, because it wasn't. The house was still there. Sagging porch, white paint peeled to gray. Windows staring like shut eyes beneath heavy lids. Empty, abandoned, or so it seemed. I parked at the curb, engine ticking in the silence. I didn't need keys. The front door opened with a reluctant groan, hinges yawning like something waking from sleep. Inside, dust and cold. Familiar layouts buried under rot. The wallpaper in the hall still had the faint pattern of stars my father had pasted there in '91, even though I hadn't seen it since before he left. And beyond the kitchen, past the sagging screen door, the yard. I stepped out slowly. The tree was still there. The red maple, its limbs were bare, clawing the gray sky like a warning. The earth beneath it sloped, subtly a soft swell in the frozen ground. I stared at that rise and felt something bloom in my stomach, something sour and old. I remembered crying under that tree. I remembered calling for someone, but no one came. The diary burned warm in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. The pages flipped on their own. A new entry had formed. Dig. I dropped to my knees. Dirt froze my palms. I hesitated, then clawed into the soil. Each handful came easier, softer, like it wanted to be opened. And then, my fingers touched wood. I stopped breathing. The box was small, child-sized. No lock, no hinges, just buried. I pulled it free, heart pounding like I'd stolen something from the earth that it didn't want to return. I opened it. Inside, beneath the damp cloth, a single page torn from the diary. It had my handwriting on it, but it was dated tomorrow. You were never supposed to find this, but now that you have, it's yours again. Below the words, a name. My brother's, Eli. I hadn't spoken that name in 20 years, because Eli never existed, except I remembered him now. The moment I saw his name, it was like something inside me cracked open, not pain recognition, like remembering a word in a language I didn't know I spoke. Eli. I said it aloud, once, softly. The wind picked up, not strong, just enough to rustle the dead leaves around the tree like fingers brushing against paper. I looked back at the diary. The torn page began to curl, edges blackening, but not from fire, from being seen. That's what it wanted. It wanted me to see, to remember. And I did, not all at once, but in shards, like broken glass, pressed gently into the back of my mind. Eli had been 5, barefoot most of the summer, always humming, always asking me to play near the tree. We had a game, a dumb game. Dig a hole, bury something, dig it up later. But that day, I buried something I couldn't find again. Not a toy, not a box. Him. The memories came in pieces flashing behind my eyes, his hand slipping from mine. Dirt flying, my voice screaming into empty air that swallowed sound like water, and then silence, then forgetting. I don't know if I made myself forget, or if something else did, something in the house, something in the wall, because when I went back inside, hands trembling, the diary opened before I even touched it. A single line spread across the page like a wound. Now you remember. So now it remembers you. I heard the attic door creak open. Even though I was standing in the kitchen, I turned toward the stairs. The house was darker now, The kind of dark that doesn't wait for sunset. The kind that chooses you. I started climbing, not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. Because something had returned to its place. Something with small footsteps and dirt under its nails. Something humming, softly, the same tune Eli used to hum when we played by the tree. And from the attic, a voice called down. Small, broken, found you. The voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed in my chest, in the space where memory had just reopened, raw and wet. I stood frozen on the stairs, the diary pulsing in my hand like a second heartbeat, quicker, more urgent, the kind of rhythm that leads you somewhere you don't want to go, but already belong. I whispered his name again, Eli. The stairs answered with a soft creak, one step above me, not mine. I looked up. The attic door was wide open now. The light inside wasn't from a bulb. It was pale, cold, like moonlight on the bottom of a frozen lake. I took the next step, then another. By the time I reached the top, I could hear him breathing, soft, rhythmic, the way he used to when he fell asleep, curled beside me during storms. The attic was unchanged and yet completely different. The boxes hadn't moved, but the shadows had. They leaned now, toward the center, toward the diary in my hand, toward the thing I'd pulled out of the wall and woken up. He was standing in the far corner, small, still, but not the 5-year-old I remembered. Taller now, pale, his skin loose in places like it hadn't grown right. His mouth was slightly open, just enough to hum. The tune stopped when he saw me, and he smiled. God help me, he smiled, like I'd come home. Do you remember what you said, he asked. His voice didn't belong to a child. It belonged to every empty hallway I've ever run through in a dream, to every mirror I've looked into too long, to every second of silence. After a phone rings and no one's on the other end, I said, I'd be right back, I whispered. He nodded. You never came back. The diary snapped open in my hand one final time. A new entry. No date. Just 4 words written in my own handwriting. You buried the wrong one. I looked at Eli, at the thing calling itself Eli, and for the first time, I saw it. Not a boy, not a ghost, a gap. Something left behind by forgetting, by guilt. Something shaped like memory and filled with hunger. It stepped forward, and behind me the attic door slammed shut. I didn't move. Couldn't. The sound of the attic door closing wasn't loud. It was final, like a breath being held just a second too long. The light shifted. The shadows no longer leaned. They watched. Every corner of the attic folded inward, the air thickening, pressing against my skin, like the inside of a sealed box. Eli, or whatever had borrowed his shape, stood still, head tilted, watching me with something that wasn't quite eyes. Not hollow, not glowing, just aware, as if the attic itself had grown a face and learned how to remember. You left me, it said again. The words didn't accuse. They informed, like reminding a debtor of an unpaid balance. I opened the diary, desperate. The pages flipped wildly, too fast to read, until they stopped. One page, blank, until ink began to rise like breath-fogging cold glass. You don't get to forget, and then beneath it, but you can take my place. I looked up. He was closer now. The corners of the attic pulsed, and something inside the walls creaked, deep, organic, like bones twisting inside the old wood. A low sound filled the space. Not a growl, not even a whisper. A heartbeat. His, mine. I took a step back. My heel caught the edge of a board, and I stumbled, falling to one knee. The diary fell beside me, its spine cracking open like it had been waiting for this. I looked down and saw a page flutter forward. My name, my date of birth, my favorite hiding places. My worst fears, my last words, written before I even said them. It knew everything, and it had been waiting for the moment I remembered. Eli took another step forward. The boards beneath him didn't creak. He wasn't walking on wood. He was walking on me, on my memory, my guilt, my absence. And I realized then, the diary hadn't been recording my life. It had been rewriting it, preparing. I looked into his face and saw not a brother, not a ghost, not a monster. I saw a door, and it was opening. I don't remember choosing to kneel, but I was kneeling now, like prayer, like surrender, like something in me had been waiting for this ending since the first moment I touched the diary. The pages fluttered again, gently, like a breeze inside a sealed room. The attic pulsed once more, and I felt the floorboards settle not beneath me, into me. As if I was becoming part of them, Eli stood inches away. His hand reached out, slow and trembling, not with fear, but with purpose. His fingers brushed mine, cold, damp. Not of death, of soil, of something buried too long. "You remember now," he said, a whisper almost kind. "You left the door open." And I walked back through. I wanted to apologize, but my throat had closed. Not from fear, from something softer. Grief, maybe, or understanding. The diary began to close itself, each page folding in, with a whisper that sounded too much like voices. I looked one last time at the words written on the open page. They'd changed again. "He isn't taking your place. He's giving yours back." Eli leaned in, forehead nearly touching mine. "You get to forget again," he breathed. And with that, he was gone. The attic was empty. No diary, no boy, no heartbeat beneath the floor. Just dust and silence and me. I stood slowly. My body remembered what to do. My feet found the steps without thinking. Downstairs, the house breathed gently, like it had exhaled something it had held too long. Outside, the world looked the same, but I knew it wasn't, because something had changed, something had rewound, and I didn't know what had been rewritten, what memories had been taken, but I remembered this A name on the edge of my tongue, a song hummed in a voice I could never quite place, and a faint pressure behind the walls. Even now, if I'm quiet, I swear I can hear it, the pages turning again. Story 5. He got locked inside the school overnight. Something else wasn't locked out. I heard the echo before I felt the door lock behind me. A dull click that felt final, not mechanical, but intentional. One moment I was alone in the quiet corridors of Cranewood High at closing time. The next, the world outside vanished. I was inside, and something else was inside too. My name is Marcus Reed, and this is how I ended up trapped overnight in an empty school where the silence was heavier than walls. I joined detention cleanup as an extra shift. Hours passed, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the scent of half-dried floor wax drifting through empty hallways. I lost track of time, sorting crushed soda cans and sweeping dust beneath lockers. There were few sounds, distant hum of security cams, wheels of cleaning carts, scraping tile, my own labored breathing. I didn't notice the doors locking until seconds too late. A corridor light flickered and died. I turned toward the exit. I always exit through the east lobby, but the double doors were sealed. No panic yet. Thought the alarm panel just malfunctioned. I walked back to the polyester blue utility closet to grab more mop buckets. Doors there clanged closed behind me, shutting with a muted thud that echoed in silence. When I stepped back into the hallway, I heard the click. Metal against metal, soft but abrupt, locked. The corridor stretched in both directions under failing lights. My reflection faded in glass display cases. Heart pounding, I turned corners, retried doors, tested windows, all locked. No emergency exit, no compass rose, only shadowed emptiness. I hit the intercom. Nothing. No dial tone. Even the buzzer seemed dead. Then came the first chill. It rolled down my neck like cold breath. I paused, throat tight. I wasn't alone. But there was no heart pump, no footstep, no voice. Just the chill. I moved. Stairwell door to second floor cracked slightly. I pushed. It yielded. I ascended. Landing above was dark. Hallway lights flickering weak. The hush here deeper. The shadows longer. Something shifted behind me. Not air. Weight. I spun, shoulder rounding. Nothing. Only the stale smell of bleach and floor paste. I approached the gym doors. I used to coach in here before I left. Familiar. Safe. Except tonight, it meant nothing. I tried the lock. It budged. Sealed. I looked for side exit. None worked. A soft squeak, long pause. Then again. Not footsteps. More like a shoe dragging. Wrong pitch. Wet. Almost organic. I turned down the art wing. Student artworks hang blank alongside half-finished sculptures. Light overhead buzzed. I followed the noise. It came again, low and wet. Closer. Not behind me. Inside the walls. Corridor walls creaked, as if alive, flexing gently. The sound rose from behind plaster. Slow and deep, like something breathing beneath. I placed my palm on the cold metal lockers. Closed. Hard. I pressed ear to lock. The halls went silent. Inhaling again. I left my palm there shaking. I stepped back, twisting to scan shadows. Then I saw movement. A locker door just ajar. A dark gap in tile reflection. My breath caught. I dared not step closer. The lights flickered. When steadied, I saw a figure, not human shape, just cloth, draped wrong. A tie, a blotted blazer, crisp collar, uniform. It stood by the trophy case window looking outside, but the window showed only darkness. I froze. The figure turned, just a tilt like shifting shadow. No face, not door, just fabric moving against bone. I backed away. It glided forward, not sliding but floating, barely making a noise. The uniform pants ended mid-shin, revealing pale ankles and scuffed shoes. I recognized the style. It was the old-school uniform from before the rebrand. Discontinued 15 years ago. I swallowed. It came toward me. I retreated toward the science labs in the east wing. The figure mirrored smooth, detached, impossible. I reached the lab corridor, the old dispensary window where I used to front for morning meds. I gripped edge and looked inside. Cabinets intact. No one. No sign. Then the standing presence slipped past behind me. A cold breath caressed my ear. I didn't need sight to know it was there. I sprinted. Corridors looped. Hall numbers blinked wrong. 212, 505, 212, 407. Doors led to nowhere. No windows. No classrooms. Each led to blank drywall, underneath code-covered pipes. Lost. I heard footfalls not mine, matching my pace but never pace, always just behind the hush of each step. I dared not look. Then came the voice, soft, whispered, from the intercom speaker overhead. The static, thick voice. Low, you should have stayed. I trembled. My name spat out inside the message. You should have stayed inside. I snapped toward the speaker. Static crackled. It sounded like paper ripping behind my spine. I bolted again, ignoring labels. Turned corner blindly. Slid through doors marked staff only. Alarm beeped. I thundered in breath. Jagged. Found a classroom where door designations reversed. I hid inside. Lights outside dimmed. Something pressed under door frame. The door trembled inward. I pressed shoulder against wood. A knocking far too soft. Then heavier. Pressing. I wheezed. Footfalls paced. Then halted. Silence swallowed. then whisper through keyhole, "He's not trapped. You are." Door swung inward on its own. I backed into corner. The door creaked wider, slowly, like the room itself was unsure whether to let me stay hidden or swallow me whole. I pressed my back against the far wall, chest heaving in silence. My eyes locked on the space beneath the doorway. No shoes, no shadow, just stillness, and then movement. Not walking, dragging. A smear of something dark slid across the tile floor just past the frame, thick, slow, as if pulled by gravity, stronger than ours. I couldn't breathe. My mind fought to rationalize, to assign logic, but the only thing I could feel was the heaviness in the air, and the certainty that I was not alone. I clenched my fists. My nails dug into my palms until I felt warmth, blood maybe. I needed to move. I had to get out before the thing in the hallway remembered how to use the door. I crept toward the opposite end of the classroom. The blinds were drawn, the windows sealed tight, but I could just make out the hallway light bleeding in from the crack at the base of the door. Then another sound, this one from inside. The cupboard beneath the whiteboard thumped. Once, then again, slow, hollow, deliberate. I stopped breathing. My legs nearly buckled. The cupboard handle began to turn. I had nowhere to go. I lunged toward the storage closet in the corner, shoved the door open, and pulled it shut behind me. Just as the cupboard clicked open, I pressed my back against the wall of cleaning supplies and broken geometry sets, heart beating louder than my thoughts. Silence stretched. Then came the whisper from inside the classroom, so close I could almost feel it forming frost on the other side of the door. "You didn't lock it out. You locked it in." The light bulb in the closet buzzed faintly overhead, then flickered, then died. Darkness and breathing, but not mine. Behind me, too close, too deep, too wrong. And I understood in that split second before I turned around that the thing in the school didn't want to find a way in. It had always been here, waiting for the doors to close, waiting for someone like me to stay too late. I turned, but there was no face, just a uniform, empty, still standing. And it raised its hand like it wanted to teach me something I'd never forget. The hand didn't move like it belonged to anything alive. It lifted slowly, joints bending against their nature, as if remembering how to mimic being human. The fingers curled, palm open toward me, not to strike, not to claw, to offer. But I couldn't look at the hand. I was too focused on the gap inside the collar of the uniform. There was nothing there, no skin, no neck, just darkness, deep and still, like the empty space between thoughts, between blinks. A void dressed up in school colors and buttons. I should have screamed. Instead, I whispered, "What are you?" The thing tilted the fabric, pulling tight where a head should have been. Then the closet door behind it shut. Not slammed, shut, firm, final, like it was never meant to be open in the first place. And it answered, but not with a voice, with a memory. Suddenly I was 7 again, standing in this very hallway, watching my mother walk away after dropping me off late. The door hadn't closed right, and I'd heard voices whispering behind it when no one else did. I'd asked a teacher about them. She'd smiled too quickly, too wide. "There's nothing back there," she'd said. "Just pipes. Old sound. It's nothing, sweetheart." But I remembered the fear. That same fear bloomed now. Full, alive. Because the thing in the uniform stepped toward me. 1 step, 2. And the floor under us shifted. Tiles buckled softly, like skin stretched over something moving underneath. The linoleum pulsed. The lights in the hallway outside dimmed until only one remained far down the corridor. The thing in front of me stopped. It raised its arm higher and pointed, not at me, at the door behind me. I turned slowly, on it fresh chalk lines. A phrase handwritten in a looping, perfect script. "You were never supposed to leave." I reached out and touched the words. They were wet, still drying, still being written. The uniform rustled again, like breath, like silk pulling across the surface of a still pond. I stepped forward. It didn't stop me, because it didn't need to. It had already followed me inside. It had always been inside. The moment I stepped into the school after hours, the lock had clicked shut behind me. Not to keep me safe, to keep me contained. Even now, I swear I hear footsteps echoing every time I close my eyes. Not above me, not below. Inside the walls, inside me. The hallway swallowed me as I stepped out of the classroom, each footfall echoing like it didn't belong to me. The uniform remained behind motionless, but I could feel its presence threaded through the air like humidity before a storm. It didn't follow. It didn't have to, because the school had changed. The lockers no longer lined up. Some had vanished, entirely replaced by bare wall. Others were half-open doors yawning wide, like mouths revealing nothing inside, just more dark. The hallway itself seemed to have narrowed. Or maybe I'd grown. Or maybe space just doesn't work the same way after midnight. I kept moving. Every now and then I heard footsteps. Not mine, not distant, mirrored. Whenever I stopped, they did too. A beat behind me. Always a beat behind. I turned a corner, trying to reach the main lobby. The emergency exit should have been there, lit green, unlocked from the inside. That was the rule. But there was no lobby, just another hallway, a copy of the last. Same lockers, same cracked tile, same light flickering at the far end. And at the end of that hall, a figure, standing, still, its head tilted, watching. I blinked. It was closer. Not much, just enough. I turned and ran. Doors blurred past, a janitor's closet, a darkened stairwell. Room 308, 309, 308, again impossible. The numbers had begun to repeat. The school was looping. I pushed through the first open door I saw, slamming it behind me. A classroom, cold, empty. I pressed my back against the door and listened. Nothing. And then from the intercom, Marcus Reed. "Attendance incomplete. Return to your room." The voice was not human, not digital. It was the building speaking, with every wall, every pipe, every fiber of concrete and steel trained to hold me in place. I didn't scream. I sat down. In the desk nearest the window, the chalkboard was clean, but a sentence began to appear, letter by letter, as if written by invisible hand. "Class begins when you forget who you were." And beneath it, "You're almost ready." I pressed my fingers to my face. I couldn't remember what day it was, or what I looked like, or why I'd come here at all. The eraser tray beneath the chalkboard trembled, a faint shiver, like something exhaling through wood. I sat frozen, watching dust swirl in the pale beam of the overhead light, dust that seemed too thick, too deliberate. It twisted in the air, like it knew I was watching. My name, Marcus Reed. It sounded wrong in my head now, like something learned secondhand. A costume I wasn't supposed to take home. I stood up slowly, every bone stiff from the cold that hadn't come from the weather. The hallway outside the classroom window was changing. Not dramatically, not enough to be obvious, but wrong. Lockers taller than they should be, door frames narrowing, light fixtures bending down like they were listening in. The sentence on the chalkboard faded, replaced by new handwriting, worse this time, messier. "You've almost forgotten enough." And then below it, one more memory, one more room. The handle of the classroom door turned. I hadn't touched it. I backed away. It opened inward with the slowness of certainty. The hallway beyond was not the one I entered from. This one had no lights at all, just walls that pulsed faintly, like they'd been filled with something warm and living. I stepped through. I didn't decide, my body just moved. The hallway swallowed me again. I walked and walked until the sound of a bell rang overhead. Faint, warped, like it had been played backward. A classroom door stood ahead. Different, old, frosted glass, wood splintered from age. A sign hanging crooked, faculty use only. I opened it. Inside was not a room. It was every room I'd been in. The same desks, the same chalkboard, the same smell of erased lessons, and on the teacher's desk, an old class list. My name at the top. Beneath it, dozens of names crossed out in red ink, and under that, you were the last to arrive. Something stood in the far corner. Not a person, not a thing, just the shape of something waiting, and it stepped forward, slowly, silently, smiling. Not with a face, with recognition. And I remembered, I hadn't been locked in the school. I'd been sent here. It approached like memory, slow, steady. Impossible to unsee once it arrived. That thing, whatever it was, wore no face, no limbs, no voice. Just presence, just gravity. The overwhelming pull of every mistake I'd ever buried, every silence I'd used to avoid remembering. It didn't need to speak. I already knew what it was. It was the absence of me, the version that never left the desk, the version that stayed behind all those years ago when I first hid under the bleachers to avoid the night shift cleanup, the one who watched the janitor vanish behind a door that didn't exist and never told anyone, the one who forgot the sound of his own voice. It stepped closer. I stepped back, and the room responded. Chairs turned to face me. Desks slid quietly into new rows, all pointed inward, all narrowing the space around me. The chalkboard lit with fresh white marks, one line at a time. "Welcome back, Mr. Reed." My knees gave out. The door behind me shut. The lights didn't dim, they dissolved, until only the glow from the chalkboard remained. The shape knelt down, not in mockery, not in threat, but in recognition. Like it knew me, like it was me, the version who belonged here, who had always belonged. And that's when I knew there had never been a way out. Not really. You don't get locked in, you get kept, held, catalogued, until your shape fits the shadow in the chair, until your name fades just enough to be rewritten. The chalkboard changed one last time. It now read, "Class is in session." And beneath it, even now, if you listen closely, you'll hear him still walking the halls, still trying to remember which door led out. What happened that night was never written down. No report, no name, just echoes. Some say he's still in there, walking empty halls, turning doorknobs that only open for those who forget to leave. So if you find yourself alone in a place that should have gone quiet, listen closely. You might not be alone. Even now, if you listen closely, you might hear it whisper your name. If you crave more true ghost stories, subscribe to True Ghost Vault now.